Dude, I already got wrapped up in one. I had a foreclosure. Do you know what that emotion's like? I had a bankruptcy. Do you know what that process is like? Do you know what a volunteer repo's like? Do you know what it is to be depressed for 9 years? I do. Do you know what over
Mm.
optimism can do? I know what that is. Do you know that houses don't always go up in value? I know what that's like. I'm really scared, man. So I mean, I think that we can definitely go in depression. I don't.
Welcome back to Luke Mindset. Today's video is going to be absolutely bonkers. So I'm going to bring in Travis. He didn't even know that I was going to introduce him like that. And I've linked his channel in the description. So check him out. You probably already know about Travis. His channel is absolutely fantastic. And he has an amazing heartbeat on the US real estate market, which is pretty much, lots of real estate markets are following that. And the same thing is going on. So how are you doing?
Honestly, Luke, I'm doing a lot better because that was a huge surprise how you said bonkers like that. And my heart is now filled with love. I am ready to answer some questions and collaborate, my man.
We're talking about Airbnb to start off with here and the effect that that's going to have on the real estate market and also the rental market. And what are your kind of thoughts on what's gone on with Airbnb over the past 4 years, since 2019 to now, how it's kind of changed?
Airbnb are really all short-term rentals, right? So, it's been honestly, look, short-term rentals has been, in my opinion, obviously this is all my opinion. I don't have a crystal ball, blah, 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 blah. But
Hmm.
honestly, man, it has been devastating in some local areas, not only to potential first-time home buyers or any potential home buyers that wanted to potentially an affordable house, but it's also been extremely devastating to existing neighborhoods that are not normally for tourists attract, they're not normally for rentals, quite frankly. It's doing a few things. On one hand, yes, people are making a substantial amount of money, but on the other hand, it's really upsetting a lot of people, and that is causing certain cities, certain states to actually start banning Airbnbs, and by them banning Airbnbs or re-regulating the Airbnbs, I believe that obviously could potentially, depending on the metro area, help us out of the mess that investors helped us get in. Now I understand it's the Federal Reserve, low interest rates, but nevertheless, the explosion with Airbnbs in the last 3 to 4 years, Luke, has been shocking, and it's taken a lot of opportunity away from buyers of homes, first-time home buyers. It's hard for me to say it's the best thing. I know that it helps the economy, right? I think there's billions of
Hmm.
dollars that's pumped back into the economy as a result of the guests of Airbnb. To have an Airbnb, which is essentially like a hotel in a
Hmm.
normal residential, neighborhood, it's an awful thing. It's a revolving door. You don't know who the tenants are. There's all kinds of crime going on. I even heard of sex trafficking in Dallas, a neighboring metro area to me. So
Wow.
it's a really yucky thing. Not to mention the calls they can get from people partying. Normally, it's a partying type of situation.
Yeah.
All in all, Luke, I don't like it. I think Airbnb is going to continue to take a hit, and not only just because of the the new regulations, but people are starting to understand that it's not always cheaper to use Airbnb because of the cleaning fee is like $300 for a clean. And when I go on vacation, I don't
Yeah.
want to clean. I don't want to clean something, man. So I'll just stay at a hotel, Marriott, Hilton, and that's another reason. And then a third thing is there's an overwhelming amount of inventory right now. I mean, I think that in Houston, how many Airbnb listings are just in Houston alone?
Yeah, yeah, let's bring that up. So there's currently, it says 12,000, but when I was looking on the chart just here, it was saying
Jeez.
15,000. So Q1 2023, 15,084 active rentals. And if you look, we're starting to see more Airbnb growth across cities that are cheaper and more affordable. And I think that could be part of the massive growth that we saw in the housing market during 2021, because Montreal, it's another market that is just absolutely insane. So this, get this, Travis, Montreal has 12,452 Airbnbs and is a much smaller city
Yeah.
than Houston. And it's just like, but it's actually, compared to other cities in Canada, it's more reasonably priced. And I think
Right.
that's what's allowing people to get get in there and do all these Airbnbs. But I think the problem with it is that they don't really realize that they're really hotel managers and they're in the tourism industry. They think they're in some sort of, I don't even think they acknowledge any risk, to be honest. I think there's a lot of people who are just going into it thinking it's going to be a cash cow and it's just going to continue on this way. They are in the tourism industry. And what happens to that industry when we go into a recession? Let me bring up Houston again, because that even showed it. And you can do this with any place as well. It's not just Houston. But you can see how in 2020, when like we didn't know what was going on with the sickness and everything, Airbnb listings, they came down. And then they finally hit a bottom actually Q4 2021, which is really surprising. They started
Yeah.
shooting up in 2022. But that makes a lot of sense, actually, because when you really think about it, they're probably going to more riskier things to try and make it work.
So I noticed on the map, and that may just be Houston and Montreal, but it looked like there was growth from Q4 of 2022 to Q1 of 2023. Is that correct? Is that an
Yeah,
overall
let
growth
me.
or specific to those metros? Look, it's gone up.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah. So
that's it's telling me that there's even with everything we're saying, Luke, saturation. People are like
yeah.
boycotting it. They're getting banned across the world. It's gone up in shares.
Yeah, and look how it's flattened out. And you are right, actually, because I've seen this also happening. And this is the crazy thing, Travis. Like, I look across, I mean, I don't say this on my channel, I don't really do it on my channel, but I'm looking at like all kinds of real estate markets. And even like in places like Cabo in Mexico, you're seeing it flatten out too. And it is like probably a saturation thing, like you're saying. It's insane. When I was in Cabo, for instance, and we were staying at an Airbnb, we just really stay at Airbnbs because we cook for ourselves most of the time. When we were staying there, I was looking locally to that Airbnb that we were at, how many were available for the next week. And there
How
was so much inventory available. And I was just like, yeah, this is during the peak season because everybody goes down to Mexico when it's cold up north in the winter. And I spent, the peak seasons in these different places across Mexico. And it was the same thing. And most of the buyers are coming from Canada and the US. What do you think about that? Lots of the buyers are coming from the US. Do you think they're using their home equity?
First of all, I want to say that no investors have different levels of intelligence. Okay. I personally believe that a predominant amount of the recent Airbnb owners are not good at investing, quite frankly, and know nothing about a
Mm,
recession or a cycle like 2008 that we went through. I do think that people have cashed out on their home equity with a HELOC or home equity line of credit, pull out the money, and it's burning a hole in their pocket. People have to spend. It's just the
yeah.
craziest thing, man. Obviously, you and I are a lot smarter with our money, but it's burning a hole in their pocket. I believe there's a large percentage of those investors pulling out money on a HELOC, putting that money into an Airbnb without fully understanding the ramifications. To me, what I'm looking at is, to me, the biggest thing is the regulation. A metro area decides to completely ban an Airbnb, which honestly, there's a little bit of grounds to do that. There's a little bit of grounds to do that. You can't have hotels. You cannot have hotels in a residential neighborhood.
Hmm.
But if they ban it, I think that will flood the market full of inventory. And I think that flood of inventory is really at this point of the housing market cycle. I think that's really going to continue to cause prices to go down. The question will be moving forward is are you in a metro area that is, heavy in Airbnbs? Now I know because you just showed me that I am in Houston. I think you showed me something like what was it, 15, 13,
Yeah,
$15,000
15,000. It's
thousand
doubled.
listings?
It's doubled.
Dude, if we just get if Houston said, you know what, no more Airbnbs, and we get half of those listings, Houston's going to crash.
Yeah.
Houston will crash. There will be too much inventory, and a lot of the inventory will be from distressed sellers in the form of investors liquidating their Airbnb properties. So I think that's a black swan. I don't know, Luke, how big that will be, how much it will spread, but I certainly know that there is a lot of Airbnb listings. I think well over 1 million in the United States at this point.
Yeah, yeah, it's just another component to which could come out of a recession and just make things even worse for the housing market if you've got people who are forced onto the market because of job loss and stuff like that. And then you've also got the Airbnb just falling apart at the same time. It's just a recipe for disaster. And I think you're right. I've seen and met a lot of the people who are doing these Airbnbs, and they don't take any kind of responsibility for the risk that they're taking doing it. And I think it has been glamorized by a sort of industry that has created courses and seminars, even promoted itself through YouTube.
So it's just like Airbnb. I mean, we have so much things. I mean, this isn't just happening in the US. This is happening all over the place, the entire world. We don't want short-term rentals. We don't want hotels as our neighbors. We don't know who's
Yeah.
in there, if they're doing drugs, whatever it is. We don't want it. It needs to stop, brother. And I'm telling
Mhm.
you, man, that may be one of the other areas where we get our inventory and we have a more balanced housing market. We need our housing market to come back to fundamentals. I believe one way to do that is Airbnb melting down as it should. Now, I know they're not entirely why we have inflated prices, but they surely didn't help the situation.
No, yeah,
Um,
yeah, you're
and
totally
I'm
right.
renting, Luke, and I'm mad. I mean, I'm renting right now. This is a rental house. I converted my primary to a rental. I have a 2.35% 30-year fixed. So I converted it, but
That is
instead of buying,
awesome.
man, I don't like renting, dude. I just think right now is one of the rare times where it makes sense to rent. And I'm waiting out the house market. I'm improving my purchasing power. I'm well qualified. I have no consumer debt, great credit, money saved. But I refuse to purchase an overvalued house that I'm not madly in love with. And even if I was
Yeah,
madly in
yeah,
love with it, even if I was madly in love with it, I at least need a good deal. I'll settle for
yeah,
not having a great deal, but good deal. And again, I think that Luke, there's so many black swans, so many boots that haven't dropped yet to buy real estate right now. I just think that would be, unless you have a whole bunch of
sad.
cash. Yeah, I think that normal people buying real estate right now, it puts them in a huge box, a risk box that they're essentially chained to their house with an inability to sell, with an inability to refinance because they're upside down in their house. So very
Yeah,
interesting stuff happening in the housing market right now. I mean, some metros aren't showing on the surface issues, right? So a lot of people hold on to the narrative like, hey, this area right here is not crashing, so we're okay, everything's okay. But yet, look at California, Phoenix, Austin, Boise. I mean, those are signs, right? Those are
yeah.
signs of what's happening. So I'm sorry, that was a little bit of
No,
a rant.
no, that's okay because you got us back on topic. One thing that's happening right now in Canada, and I believe it's happening in the US too, is are you starting to see like medium prices stabilize slash go up a little bit in the spring market right now?
So we had, I believe it was 26 metro areas that are continuing their downward decline. So
Okay,
we have 1/4 of the country still going down in value. Okay,
okay.
so it's not a total flip. However,
Hmm.
yes, I have seen median sales price go up in several metro areas, and that should happen. It's the spring
Yes.
buying season, and what I'm telling people, it's a fluctuation. Keep watching the trends, right? We need to keep watching the data to
Yeah.
make sure a trend doesn't form. But I think that all we're seeing is just a small blip, on the radar, just like Luke that happened in 2008 Q1 and Q2 of 2008. Median sale price went up before a second round straight down.
Yeah.
So people are like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's recovered in '08. And then little did they know it was one of the worst years in the housing market in history. And people were
Yeah.
still buying, and it appeared that home value was recovering. And you know what? Look, we don't have a crystal ball. Maybe it will recover. Okay.
Hmm.
But I just really don't think so. And why would you risk it? Because inventory is going up. So the longer that we wait, the more at the very least, the more options that we will have. Again, in
Yeah.
most metro areas, I know in Houston and in the area that I'm watching, Luke, in the last 3 weeks, 25% increase in inventory.
Wow. Yeah, that is. And is that coming off historically low levels or high
Oh
levels
yeah,
anyway?
no, no. We only have, I believe, I think it's around 14 metro areas that actually have over pre-pandemic inventory. So a lot of people don't
Wow.
realize that, and Austin is one of them in Texas. We already have
Hmm.
metro areas that have more inventory than the pre-pandemic. So those are going to be areas that, like, hey, if y'all want to watch the price crash, watch over here. Austin again is one of them. Austin has a considerable amount of inventory, whereas San Diego, that is also experiencing price decline does not have a significant amount of inventory. So I believe we're seeing price decline in areas like San Diego as a result, specifically, Luke, of unaffordability, interest rate, prices of houses.
Yeah, we've got similar things going on in markets like Toronto and Vancouver, big cities where the prices have just gone absolutely insane. Let's talk a little bit about doing a market analysis, because I think that's important, because it's going to bring your head back to reality. So
Yeah.
if you're up there in your emotions and you're just anxious and you don't know what to do and you're thinking about pulling the trigger, then I think that brings you back to it. So what sort of things do you include when you're doing a market analysis?
Okay, okay. I'm so glad you said that, man, because some of the haters that don't listen to our content, they just point the finger, oh, you're saying this, you're saying that. So some people miss what I'm saying, and I'm actually trying to empower people, right? Explaining how to purchase real estate. One of the best things that someone can do to get a general idea of the value of a property is to do a market analysis. A market analysis is taking all of the sold properties. Okay, listen, the sold, not listed, sold. They're already sold. So what you do is you take all of the sold properties in the subject properties subdivision, just depending on the market analysis, but obviously real estate's hyper local. If you want to do a metro, you do a metro, but real estate's about
Hmm.
hyper local. So you're going to want to do a market analysis for, I would say, 4 years in the subdivision, only the subdivision of where that property is located. The market analysis will give you the average price per square foot for each of the years you did it: 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. It's really, really important to understand the average price per square foot for those years, especially, Luke, in new construction. I've been able to show my viewers that home builders in new construction play games. I found properties that have $100,000 price cuts, but they're still 10% over market value. And then I've also found listings that their prices are increasing, but they're
Hmm.
10% undervalue. So, in other words, if you don't have the data, you're flying with your emotions, my friend. And that's what I try to teach. And I think people need to use the data to find the deal.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Because you're just grounding yourself. I think when we get into our emotions, it's important to do exercises like that. Scott, he says about, does it pencil out, making sure it
Yeah.
pencils out. I mean, across Canada, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the cities in Canada, like the amount of, like, you would be negative cash flow like 30% even. It's absolutely insane. It's just got so out of whack, that you would be losing just insane amounts of money if you bought right now and then you were flipping it to a rental. Like, you would just be decimated. You wouldn't be able to do it. And I think that's a big risk as well going into this housing market that people need to bear in mind, because if you have a protection to rent it out, it is good protection, because then even if you don't want to become a landlord and you don't want to rent it out, you can still use that avenue in case of job loss or business income loss or whatever. So, and
Yeah.
this question is loaded question.
You're asking me a
Kind
loaded
of.
question?
Kind of, yeah.
All right, let me switch to my loaded question camera. I'm ready.
All right. So, do you think we're in a depression right now?
I think that we're headed towards one. I think that we have a Federal Reserve and Congress fighting each other. On one hand, the
Hmm.
Federal Reserve is trying to quantitative tightening, is trying to get money out of the economy, raising interest rates, and battling inflation. And on the other hand, we have a government that's printing money like maniacs. So,
Yeah.
to be quite honest, I think all of that is just like all of the money printing and putting a band-aid on a bullet hole instead of letting the market naturally correct. I think the more that they try to put that band-aid on there, Luke, I think the more likely it is for us to go into depression. So at this point, it's starting to like I'm starting to see like, whoa. And the other thing that's crazy, and that makes it even more likely that it's even either deep recession or depression, people are so clueless, dude. People are so clueless, Luke. They are stuck in their bubble, man. They don't want to change their life. It's going maybe the way they want it, a little more expensive, but they don't know what's coming, brother.
Hmm.
I think a depression, I wouldn't rule it out. I don't know what's going to happen next, man, but I definitely think that we're in store for some, pretty significant pain. I mean, we saw the 1 month go down today over 50 basis points.
Yeah, I know that is absolutely insane. And we were talking about that. And it is kind of crazy because that kind of means there's a scramble for collateral. There's liquidity issues
Yeah.
in a system where they pumped unbelievable amounts of liquidity into it just 3 years ago. So,
It's a
like, it's a
It's a
warning sign.
systematic failure. It's a systematic
Yeah.
failure. They're not going out of business for fraud. They've done
Mhm.
nothing wrong, Luke. They're going out of business because of a systematic failure. And I just did a video. It's funny. I was doing the video. Orlando put it out. But we've also have reports where they're losing money on mortgages now, dude. So
Wow.
they're losing money giving mortgages. In the average loss per mortgage is $361. And I'm sitting back and I'm thinking, how's that? That's also a systematic failure. It's a systematic
Yeah.
failure. They've done nothing wrong. So I think honestly, the catalyst of the systematic failure, the biggest systematic failure here, the low interest rates, not the high interest rates.
Yeah. And you know what? I don't even think it was just during 2020. I think it was the whole decade after 2008. They tried to raise rates. When was it? I think it was around 2013. Probably wrong about that. And then we had the taper tantrum. And then they caved. And then the
Yeah.
market has held them to that ever since. And we had like a similar repeat when Jerome Powell was trying to do QT in 2015. I always get my my dates mixed up. It was either 2015 or 2016. We had a similar thing happen. So, you know, they always cave to these markets. And I think that's really the problem.
Yeah.
I think it's quite possible that they're not going to cave to the markets. I mean, look what happened to the market last year, and they didn't really bat an eyelid. And even Jerome Powell has kind of beefed up his talk when he's been questioned on the markets.
So what's really interesting, Luke, is like, and I've heard Kathy Woods just say this. She said the Fed follows the market. And I'm like, actually, that makes sense because the market has been fighting the Fed the whole time. So what I'm thinking is it may be possible that the Fed is following the market and that the market is just so broken that even if the Fed is following the market, it's still on course for a total disaster. A lot of possibilities, man. Quite frankly, we're trying to guess what liars are doing. Really hard to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you're totally right. One thing I want to bring up on screen, I actually made this myself. That's why it looks so terrible. I'll tell you what this is. So essentially, the red line there, that's just the CPI doubled. So all I did, I took the CPI and doubled it. And then I adjusted people's wage growth to that new CPI to show where wage growth has actually been going back to 1997. Now, this was in Canada, but it's going to be exactly the same in the US too. As you can imagine, I mean, the two economies tied at the hip. So anyways, you can see that during 2022, we went down to like negative 12% in wages. And I mean, what do you think of the CPI? Do you think that's accurate? I suppose I should ask that question first.
Huh. I think it's better called CP lies. To be honest with
Yeah,
you, it's unaffordable, man, and that's one of my holdups on the whole housing market crash is the foundation is fake. It's a foundation that's hollow. If the housing market would have went up based on fundamentals, all right, maybe we have a foundation, maybe we get through this. But the fact that the housing market in the US went up about 40% in roughly 2 years and did not match at all wage growth, it means that that foundation or the bubble, I don't know how it's not even popped yet. The reason for
yeah,
the bubble is the money printing. They printed the money, they lowered the interest rates. People got a down payment for free in the form of stimulus and a 2 and 3% interest rate. When the Federal Reserve releases the floodgates of demand, it doesn't matter how much inventory we have. They're going to just
yeah,
buy. Same thing in '02 when they deregulated lending restrictions. Everyone could buy a house. When you release that floodgates, bad things are going to happen, and that's what they
yeah.
did the last 3 years.
And then you pay for it for years and years after that. I mean, the thing is that people don't realize. I mean, I've visited the US many times after 2008, having family in Michigan, and Michigan got hit real bad after 2008. It was just gnarly what was going on there. So many people were unemployed. Like, it was just a complete disaster. It was like somebody swung a wrecking ball through the economy there. There's been all these distortions that have been made by the low rates. Think about it, Travis. Like, if we were in a high interest rate environment, talking about the Airbnb and all these other, I mean, Airbnb wouldn't even exist. if it wasn't for low rates. That's
The,
kind of
the low
funny
rates
thing.
the low rates were designed to get us through lock. It was not designed to do. I mean, look at what happened. I mean, honestly, man. I mean, if they would have stopped the money printing in '02 like they could have, maybe we could have got out of this a little bit unscratched. Or what, '01 they stopped it in 2021. This is bad. The money wasn't used the right way. It was so that we would survive through a medical emergency. Can we say that?
Hmm.
Um, so, when I started seeing those checks being printed, dude, and the government started mailing me checks, I went to my wife. I'm like, we're saving every dollar and we're going to spend less money because this doesn't happen. If they're giving us money, we're going to pay for this. So I still have to this
Yes.
day all of my stimulus money. We have all of our stimulus money. We refuse to use that. This what happened right now, as far as millennials, right? Millennials, certain age group, predominant amount of buyers are millennials. They've never gone through anything like this before. And they're trying to school me, Luke. Luke, they're trying to tell me that they're like, no, this doesn't happen. That it's like, dude, I already got wrapped up in one. I had a foreclosure. Do you know what that emotion's like? I had a bankruptcy. Do you know what that process is like? Do you know what a volunteer repo's like? Do you know what it is to be depressed for 9 years? I do. Do you know what over
Mm.
optimism can do? I know what that is. Do you know that houses don't always go up in value? I know what that's like. This is
Hmm.
I'm really scared, man. So I mean, I think that we can definitely go in depression. I'm not at the point where I would say I still think there's a way out of this to where maybe 3 to 4 years of pain. And honestly, and with that 1 month going down and then shooting back up like we saw today, there's something happening. There's a liquidity crisis. We know that.
I mean, the swings in volatility of that 1 month is really something of note, I think. And it doesn't necessarily mean that something's going to happen like right away, but it means something is happening in the financial system where somebody is possibly getting a margin call. It's kind of incredible that this is rippling out across the entire global financial system. Like it's not just the US. So that affected global
Yeah.
bond markets, government bond markets. It's not a good thing. It's an ominous sign to have that happen, I think. And good point bringing that up because yeah, I don't think it's good. And by the way, I don't know when people are going to be watching this video, but it's Thursday, April 20th,
Oh,
because yeah, yields might be way up by then, and people are like, "What are these guys talking about?" But today we had just a huge swing in the 1 month Treasury, and that Treasury is typically used for collateral. And when it's below repo, which is essentially where banks can go and park money and get what the Federal Reserve is paying Fed funds rate. Why is that? And that generally means because collateral is short. People are looking for collateral, or they're being called, they're getting margin calls and they're being told, hey, you need to post some collateral which isn't commercial mortgage backed securities or whatever it is this time. Who knows what it is? I mean, we don't really know that yet, but commercial real estate certainly looks like a sore spot. Moving on into that, what are your thoughts on commercial real estate?
I think that's the next black swan. I think the first black
Yeah, I
swan was the
agree.
bank runs, and the bank runs again. It was systematic failure. They did nothing wrong. It wasn't even a cash thing. They just didn't have the
Hmm.
money, Luke. They
Yeah,
weren't trying to
yeah.
take cash. It was just like just transfer my money here and we're good, right? They didn't even have that. That was the first one. I think the second one is I think there's no doubt about it. I think it's going to be commercial financing commercial real estate. I'm convinced that commercial real estate is it's going to take a bigger hit than it did in 2008, 2009. There are some economists that are forecasting a 40% decline in value. So when that happens, again, I think it's gonna put additional pressure on the U.S. banking system, even around the world. The more and pressure that's getting put on the banking system, more regional banks are going to go under, more credit tightening, possibly a credit freeze. And on top of that, remember, mortgage is dead. So they're losing so much money right now, dude. There's a lot going on, Luke.
I know, yeah. There's so many different things, and this is why I think, and I say that with a smile on my face, because you have to smile about these things sometimes because it's dark times, and if we're just all stood here like doom and gloom constantly, then we'd all be depressed. But the reality is, yeah, there is so many different things. We've just never had this many things come into head all at once. And like you say, it's really because of the low interest rate policies that we've seen that we've got to this point, because everything's just been kicked down the road, can kick down the road, can kick down the road. The funny thing is, I just don't, and maybe you have a different view on this, but I just don't see how the Federal Reserve is going to step in and save the day again. Just at like, they literally came in 2020 and they just made everything 10 times worse. And are we going to think that they're going to be able to come in 2023 and do exactly the same thing? And how long is it going to take? So what are your kind of thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I would say that all they have to do is nothing. If they just do nothing and keep us on this journey, I think I think obviously we're going to correct, right?
Yeah.
So the longer that we stay on this journey, the better. Here's what freaks me out, Luke. 2024 election year. Whenever
Yeah.
there's an election year, a bunch of crap happens behind the scenes that's dirty and junky and just trashy. And I know that the housing market, in my opinion, the housing market is going to be a huge topic of conversation for the presidential election. But quite frankly, man, with an election year in 2024, yeah, it's possible that they print more money and make things worse. And that really scares me. And if they do that, I think that's when we start talking about depression. Because again, you need to let it heal naturally. You can't heal a bullet wound by putting Vaseline and a Band-Aid on that. You need stitches. It needs to heal. It's going to be painful, but the pain is the healing. The pain is the healing.
What you said there is important, because if they come in and they do what they did in 2020 all over again, I think there's a danger, a real danger, that the market is going to look at them doing it again and think, here comes inflation 2.0, because the markets are forward looking. And this has happened so quickly. Like when you think about what happened in 2001 to then 2008, that was a much longer period of time because we had less debt in the system. Now we have so much debt in the system, the times are just getting shorter and shorter. And I think the danger is that the market is just going to see the Fed coming in as like, what next crisis is coming in a couple of years type thing, and what inflation is going to come, and the fact that people think the inflation is going to come will cause inflation by itself, which is kind of insane.
Honestly, look, I'll question that inflation is even going away to begin with. To be honest with you, I mean, if you look at all the revisions they're doing to the data, I mean, the rates need to be higher. The rates should be higher. So I don't think inflation's gone. We know it's not gone in the housing market. And the housing market is 19%, depending on the data, 19% of the economy, the housing market. Shelter is responsible for about 40% of CPI. I don't think we can all agree that the inflation has not gone away in housing. And that's where it's stickiest.
Well, yeah, and you know what, Travis, it used to be the case. And here's the funny thing. I don't know if you know the history of the CPI, but people ask me about this all the time as well. Like they say, how come you call it the CPI? Like, and there's many different reasons for that, but the primary reason is if you look at what they did after the 1970s, which was a decade of high inflation, that's when they really started to mess with the CPI almost on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
And that was really when you seen owners equivalent rents and all these other things that materialized from all the manipulating that they did after that. Had like a fixed basket of goods, and now they just change that depending on what takes their fancy. And usually it is something that has gone up in price a lot, so they know it's going to come back down. For instance, used vehicle prices, they added to the CPI in Canada in 2022. After we just seen record growth in used vehicle prices, they then add it to the CPI. And now when they're coming back down, it's capturing all the declines, which are making inflation look better, but it didn't capture any of the increases. How can you have an accurate inflation gauge when everything is changing constantly?
And that's what I mean, man. We're trying to figure out what liars are doing. I have seen because I mean, we're both in the data. I use a lot of Fred economic data. Every month that the charts update, especially in new construction, it changes. It's like the previous time is like worse, and now this other time is better until the next revision. They're just, the way what I'm saying is just taking the bad, they're hiding it, and then once the period of time has passed, they put the bad stuff on the stuff that's already passed. This is a crazy look. I just don't get how, like, people stop caring, dude. People stop caring about the truth. People stop caring about integrity. People want an easy life when the reality is this stuff makes it harder.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
messed up.
I totally agree with you. Well, listen, buddy, I want to thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your wisdom as normal, and we're definitely gonna do more of these, I'm sure. Better ones. 'Cause I feel like I messed this one up so
No.
badly, but I'll throw something together. And anyway, guys, check out Travis's channel in the description, and I'll link him down there in the pinned comment as well. And is there anything that you want to say, Travis, before we end here?
When it comes to buying real estate, it's generally the largest transaction of your life. Treat it like that. Don't use emotion, use data. That's how I'd like to end, man.
Yeah, that was perfect. That was perfect. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on. It means a lot, and I'll see you in the next one.